Welcome everybody. I'm really excited to be here. I want to thank Ben and the entire front team for putting this on. It's such an incredible group of people brought together, and hopefully the next 2 days will be really packed. So I'm going to dive right in. Really, I'm going to cover about 2.5 years worth of work, really concentrated into about 25 minutes. So I'm going to pace through this pretty quick. But really, all of you guys know, designing and delivering products are incredibly challenging. Each of us go through different sort of areas, and there's different challenges along the way. Customer expectations have become more and more challenging as we look at more complicated sort of services, interactions, and how people live their everyday lives. The amount of devices, screens, platforms, experiences that we as product and design leaders are expected to kind of deal with how we develop products at the speed of change. They've all increased in the last 10 years. And those of you who are actively building, right, know how much detail and work actually goes into, when somebody says, oh, you've got only about 6 or 7 screens, that's actually, hundreds, if not thousands of details from design artifacts, requirements, and all those things. And then it's challenging when you start to think about how that scales globally, right? So those of you who work on global products, right, now you're dealing with different regions, different territories, the complexities of GDPR and all these sort of aspects, even down to creative artwork. How do you translate that into multiple languages? What can be used for different cultural differences in different areas throughout the world? So, as Ben said before, my name, Shawn Johnson. I'm a design product CX leader, and I began working in this space a long time ago. I've actually been working as a leader for over half of my life. In fact, I started professionally when I was still actually in college. Little bit of a quick capture before we dive into the weeds and the details. I spent about 15 years building my own agencies, my own practices. I spent about a year and a half at Microsoft up in Seattle, building out their global kind of ecosystem and design language system and brand system. And then I switched over, came back to California and worked at NBC, Comcast, NBC Universal, building out every single application again from the ground up for all the NBC Universal platforms. That took me to Discovery, where my last 4 years, launching Discovery Plus and 17 other branded applications across multiple platforms. And in the past week, you'll see me go out a little bit as SHO Syndicate. Catch me offline, I'll talk to you about what that is. We just soft launched it last week. Quick capture, right? And because I've been designing, I've had the fortunate pleasure of designing and working with tons of different brands, both internally, externally. What I've noticed, and I think the realization is every mission, every organization, every experience is different. I don't care whether you're in fintech, fit tech, health tech, entertainment, streaming space. Every organization is rapidly changing right now, is transforming, and is different. My most recent role, as I mentioned, GVP of Global Product and Design for Discovery Plus and Discovery Go. On the left side, it kind of is the little bit of the highlights reels of 25 million active subscribers, 15 brands across 15 platforms. And then on the right side, it's really some of those challenges and what we have to really work through as leaders within the space, right? It's the idea of setting the product and design vision. It's aligning stakeholders and teams, mission, vision, roadmap, timelines, those types of things. And then, of course, hiring and supporting teams and delivering and iterating. So I'll get into that a little bit. And that was really the challenge as we went through this journey. Now, you look at who was on that journey, right? There's over 25 different groups that we were hiring into along the way. We weren't quite there. When I started with the organization, when I started with the company, the mandate was effectively, I think I had 13 people. We hired in throughout the global pandemic and that challenge, over 300 people worldwide to be able to tackle this big challenge that was put in front of us. So on that journey, I think one of the interesting things that I tell people about is usually these first 2 columns, that's really where our wheelhouse thinks about. But what we really do when we're looking at how we're scaling is this last column here. Like this is the parts of the organization that are usually forgotten about. And as leaders, whether you're in the product or design space, that becomes one of the most critical pain points of development, but also I think the biggest sort of lift that you can overcome, right? That's where the challenges and the rubber hits the road. When you start working with that sort of space and area, that's where your products can really accelerate. Now, when I started with Discovery, they hadn't really shipped a product in about 3 to 5 years. During the 6 to 9 months, we had to go for complete ramp up. Starting from 16, we got to maybe about 35, 40 people. And believe it or not, hiring wasn't gonna be our biggest challenge. For the most part, everybody had signed off on the ramp up. But what I'd noticed and what my team members had noticed was we were missing a critical part. Nobody within the organization, I don't care whether you were a product manager or a design manager or a leader, nobody was talking with the customers. And that was the most critical piece for the journey that we were about to be on, right? Nobody had gone through, they said that they were customer first, they were not. In fact, most organizations claim that, right? But most organizations actually don't do the work to really go in, talk to the customers, be customer-centered, customer-obsessed. And this was really why I think the failures had existed before myself and my team had gotten there, and why, to be honest, why most companies fail. So, quick idea, that's a lot. How long do you guys think, quick shout outs, how long do you think that we had once we got the mandate, right? Pausing for a moment, how long do you think that we had to actually develop this brand new service? Anybody? 6 months. Damn it. 6 months it is. If I saw you last night, you probably knew the answer already. So, I think looking at that, the idea of 6 months, right? It was more than that. What we were accomplishing at that point was not just 6 months to get something to market, right? That was our US launch. That was across 10 platforms. That was just US only. And we had roughly a 6-month window. This was, as many of you know, no matter your best sort of skill sets in product management and leadership, your best skills in design, a lot of time business mandates come down. And it got worse, right? 12 months within a window across multiple territories, USNA, EMEA, LATAM, APAC, and then 18 months for the entire piece, all 17 applications to get out there in a broad market. Oh, by the way, and we had live sports internationally and 2 Olympics we had to pull off in the same space. So as you can imagine, panic ensued, not just with me, but with the entire team, right? And really legitimate panic. And some people at this point are either gonna learn how to run into the middle of the fire or run away from it. We had 1/3 the time frame, we had 1/3 the team. And every colleague and every other leader that I'd spoke to was like, dude, you're right there. This looks bad. 10,000 foot level looks bad. You have to accomplish getting everybody forward into a single vision, a single sort of momentum, a single motion. This is what it feels like, right? You're spinning, you're getting too close to the sun. And ultimately, if you're not careful, your clicker doesn't work. No, there you go. And your challenge is, do you get too close? Do you fly too close? Does the team burn out? Do all these things happen? Biggest challenge afterwards on that, as we all know, politics, right? Navigating global business groups, all the networks, all the other teams. I could do a whole hour just on politics. And what we realized, of course, is that every framework that we had thought, everything that we had used, every measure that we looked at, right? Double diamond, triple diamond, agile, IBM loops, none of this was going to apply with what we had to do. The real process, ultimate and utter chaos, and the decision point, which is one of my favorite slides, right? Red pill, blue pill. We, of course, took the red pill. And what we found along the way, right, was there a void. There was a void of process. There was a void of structure. There was a void of teams. There was a void of how we were gonna direct ourselves. But within that, right, we found the opportunities. We understood that everything was leading towards an epic failure, but at the same time, it was an opportunity for us to innovate. It was an opportunity for us to do something that had never been done before in the company. And it allowed us to sit back for a minute and think. And it allowed us to look at 3 certain areas of how we had to kind of transform not just our own thinking to be able to accomplish this, but ultimately the organization: adaptability, intuition, and there you go, instinct. Those 3 things for us changed our approach and how we looked at it. We had the idea of being prepared. We had to be prepared for change, of course, quickly. We had to inspire parts of the organization through narratives. For intuition, right? We had to understand the customer expectations, and we had to match the business goals against that. And then instinct at that point was data was never gonna be our only answer. We didn't have access to a lot of this data. We had 6 months. So a lot of that went off of leveraging the knowledge and the experience of our team members, not just internally, but globally, to make it to that finish line, right? And to have informed decisions based on experience. And that's really one of the challenges with a lot of organizations that are data-driven, right? Everybody says data-driven, we called it data-informed, and we wanted to choose instinct. What we also found along the way, and we all talk about this, is the idea of empathy, right? Empathy and emotional narratives became our 2 greatest superpowers to be able to connect deeply, not just with our customers, but the entire story and the entire mission across the organization. Wow, I'm gonna pace up. MVP to MLP. Now I've got these directions switched, but really with the MLP, right, most lovable product framework is really what the outcome of that was. And it was more than just the ability on how we were gonna kind of break the rules and how we were gonna ship something in record time and get it out there with the least amount of flaws. And shifting that mindset was actually one of the greatest challenges and the greatest changes that happened within the organization. Because we were late to market, we were behind the 8 ball, we had something that we really wanted to actually target and resonate with a core set of customers. We didn't want to be everything to everybody. We wanted to be able to be unique in a space that we could get out to market and ultimately grow. And with that, we wanted to stand out with feature sets and ideas and content that were really gonna resonate with our customers. And that was important because what we were able to do throughout the process, throughout that journey, was focusing more deeply on the customer, aligning not just the product and the engineers and the design teams to focus effectively on the customer and really put them at the center, but also the idea of driving value and differentiation in a way. We weren't going to be able to be everything to everybody. We had to really look at what our unique offering was going to be and how we were gonna resonate. And even more so, what we found was that I know it sounds kind of touchy-feely, but the idea of going throughout an organization globally that was highly siloed, right? And in sometimes combative, the idea of love, right? It was strange, but it was a moment where we could pull everybody together across the same sort of vision, right? The same sort of mission. Nobody wanted to fail the customer. Everybody wanted this to be a success. And it really started to reframe the conversation, right? From the idea of just shipping to actually building products and experiences for customers and real people in a way that provided real value, real emotional impact. It helped actually to create deeper understanding, positive recurring habits. Why would people come back? And these were the questions that we started to ask ourselves and how we kind of built lasting relationships with those customers around the globe. We ended up moving away from traditional sort of mechanics and methods, and we looked outside of our comfort zone in our space. We looked to fashion, we looked to music, we looked to obviously product development and hardware, and we really focused the entire organization around 3 things, right? Inspiration, passion, and obsession. How are we going to create this feeling? And we looked beyond that. As that became more and more of a through line for us, we talked a lot about the Nikes, the Coca-Colas, the Disneys, like what really was going to develop value around our products. And that again was where the MLP framework came from, right? And the idea was that it was having the shared goal and purpose, increasing collaboration velocity, and ultimately being able to maximize scale. But at the center of that was the idea of celebrating our customers, right? Celebrating our culture that we had around the world. So everybody was contributing in a way. And that allowed us to hit every touch point across every service and every moment, even down to marketing, even in social, even how we acquired acquisition in a way that everybody was part of that experience. I'm gonna try to pace up a little bit, so I'm gonna kind of flash through there so we can kind of stay on track. This was the ultimate breakdown. This is a really quick and sort of way that the methods and the methodology of the MLP framework that we developed to find that success, right? Vision, mission, heroes, habits, shared goals, tools, tactics, measurements. And what we found along the way was the idea of democratizing the experience and opening ourselves up to more diverse sort of perspectives and voices throughout the entire organization and throughout the globe. I'm gonna focus a little bit, for the sake of time, only on these 3 areas. These became the most critical for us on setting the foundations for success, to be able to kind of get that ship into orbit, get around the sun, and get home safely. So the first one is the idea of vision, mission, and principles, right? Creating the vision, we had to ask ourselves, like, what does the future look like? And why do we actually want customers to move towards us, or why are they moving away from us? And then where are our unique opportunities in that model? So we had to really dig deep. And then we wanted to align the mission, which I think is the next thing that a lot of companies miss or a lot of companies skip over. And the mission and the values themselves are incredibly important to making sure that everybody is aligned, right? That shared experience and that shared journey, we know where we're going. We may not know how we're gonna get there. We don't know if we're gonna burn up on takeoff or reentry, but we know that that is where we need to be, right? So how do we get there? Bigger challenge, where do we invest? And where do we, not invest, right? Where do we pull away from and where do we focus? That's one of the most critical points within any organization, any product development, is to figure that push and pull. Like, what am I gonna stop doing? What am I gonna start doing? And being able to shift that mindset, and what do we have to change within how we approach products, platforms, services, experiences in a way to actually focus on the customer. Going into that area, we focused, then once we got that kind of accomplished, right, we had to focus on more of the principles. And the principles, you can see that eye of the storm again, right? Principles become super, super challenging in any organization because what they're there to do and what we had to accomplish is we had to have these 2 levers, right? If there was a challenge and we wanted people to be able to develop at the speed of change, we wanted people to develop autonomously. Everybody talks about that with agility. So if we don't have the principles, if we don't have the levers in place, right, then we can't make those decisions. And that means that there's too much oversight over the top and you're not allowing your teams to actually think through the challenge and figure out how to get there themselves as quickly as possible. So 5 core principles, I won't go into detail on them, you guys can read, but customer obsessed, global mindset, highly personalized, empowered, and best in class. And that was a designer in me and my team who was like, we're not shipping dirt. Like if we got one chance to do this, right? We're gonna put the best product we can put out there and have the best experiences. What's interesting when you look at that, if you actually read through it, right? Each one of those, it's more and more leaning towards the actual customer obsession. The customer was never removed from that process, and that was the biggest sea change. Now, the second part of that you saw from the initial diagram is the idea of heroes and habits. And this one I wanna, hopefully with the sake of time, I wanna sit on this for a minute, right? After the principles, we had to look at the key areas, right? How are we gonna accomplish this? Heroes and habits. So I'll pop these 2 up. The idea here, right? For the heroes, the hero journeys, we talk about customer journeys, we talk about how somebody's gonna move through. What are the most important, the 3 to 5 most important sort of experience or parts of the product experience, both on platform and off platform, that are gonna resonate? What are those heroes? How are they gonna drive the greatest impact? How are we really gonna bring people into this in this crowded market? And then habits. Those of you that are in, product design, UXR areas, understand that the habitual sort of behaviors of a customer is absolutely important. So we dove deeper and deeper with that one-to-one contact with our customers. We wanted to learn their behaviors. We wanted to understand their pain points. And moreover, we wanted to learn their passions. Holograms, which I don't have on there, was a phrase that we kind of brought up. And it's the idea of just saying no to distraction. This is one of my favorite movies, and the idea of squirrel, right? And so we actually had a award that we would pass around, which was a golden squirrel for anybody who would keep focused along the way. And what we found was with the other areas in place, right? The shared sort of experiences, the mission, the vision, the values, those types of things, the hardest group to keep on track was more of our most senior executives, our C-suite, right? Our teams were focused along the way, but the idea of distractions, right? The idea of just saying no is one of the most powerful things that we found our voice in, right? It's like, no, we would love to do that. I'm not saying no, I'm just saying not right now. Once all those other pieces are in place, once the principles are in place that everybody agreed to, right? Everybody was on board with, that was able to retain our focus. And then we didn't have to, hey, wouldn't it be great if we did this? It would be fantastic if we did this, but we're not doing that right now. So no, we're gonna continue focusing on our goal and our mission to get this thing up and running within 6 months. On that next sort of aspect, right? The idea of goals and OKRs and KPIs. This is really like the final spot that I'll walk through. Shared goals. Every organization has them, but here's the two sort of key points for us. And we worked with goals and OKRs. There were KPIs notionally, but we really focused on those first two areas. Finding the commonalities was incredibly important, right? And agreeing on the criteria for what these shared goals are. Even more so, who within the organization were accountable or owners. The clarity in that space to be able to move quickly was one of the most critical things that we had to accomplish. The second part of that was defining those accountabilities. And one of the things that we looked at, and one of the great sort of sea changes, and there was a lot of debate within my product and my design teams as well as with the engineers, was, everybody couldn't be accountable for the same thing. And having that sort of accountability and saying, okay, you know what? This is really a marketing goal. Now we are going to support that goal. And I have product leads and design leads on that space, but this is your OKR. This is your area. We will support you in that space. And what that did, it opened up two things, right? This is what we found in the void. We were able to build trust and transparency. And again, no matter how many organizations tell you that they're open, communication clearly, I've seen it time and time again. These are the two most important pieces for success. When you build trust and you have transparency, that 6-month window doesn't become that hard because I trust you, right? You said you're gonna do it, you're accountable for it, I'm gonna let you do it. We're all on the same sort of journey, we're all on the same mission. How you get there, I trust that you're gonna get there. That's a big deal in any organization. It's a big deal in your family dynamic, but in large sort of complex organizations, it's even more critical. The last couple pieces I'm gonna pop in because I wanna make sure we have time for Q&A, is the idea of enabling flexible autonomy. That was the outcome of trust and transparency. The idea when you're going through these different phases, whether you call it the MLP structure or framework, whether you're looking at the organizational aspects, this was the challenge. This is actually the case study of how we were able to pull this off. And because we were able through all those other steps to enable the idea of flexible autonomy, especially when everybody is in lockdown all across the world, we were able to align adaptable frameworks. We didn't force a framework on anybody. We adapted that framework to meet the needs of every single team. So we allowed that flexibility with the same common language, the same shared goals, the same sort of direction and accountability, but that flexibility to align frameworks. Whatever works for you, make it happen, right? That is unique in many ways, because it's like, oh, we gotta use this framework and this piece. If you don't follow these 5 steps, you're broken, or you did it wrong, right? That's usually it. And tailoring those experiences and tailoring those frameworks to each one of the teams allowed us to have that common language and direction to be able to collaborate closely across multiple time zones across the globe, right? So quick takeaways on this. I'm gonna get to the last 3 slides here, I think. That was a lot. And now you kind of guys know how it feels. I try to jam that into the entire journey into a very quick pace. That's how it felt every day, by the way, was that fast, that pace, all the different changes, all the different sort of aspects that we had to pivot. The word pivot, I should have had, the Friends thing with the couch, because that was like, it became a dirty word that we stopped using at one point. But the idea here, innovation gaps, right? Look for those. Those are opportunities. There's not one time in my experience, in my life, that the middle of chaos has not provided an opportunity for innovation. So look for those, right? Those create the opportunity for new ideas, growth, and ultimately transformation. Time constraints, that's 6 months. We never thought we were gonna make it. I didn't think we were gonna make it, right? But our team, once we had all those other areas aligned, the time constraints actually allowed us to focus, to hone in on what was the most important, and actually the ability to say no to the holograms, the squirrels. Like, we had the air coverage with the time constraints to tell people no. This is it. This is what we can accomplish. This is our focus. This is our goal. And that allowed, within that window, the ability to be flexible and adaptable, going off of the gut instinct and thriving for each one of the team members. So if I knew that you were experiencing X and somebody else was experiencing Y, I'm like, get together, do it, come back, right? Here's your window. I don't care how you get there. I trust you to do it. The MLP framework was the second part, right? And that was the idea of the outcome of what happened from this journey, and the idea of most lovable products instead of minimum viable products. Again, I could go off on a rant. You can call it minimum lovable product if that works within your organization, but the idea to really hone in on what was the most important pieces, right, for Discovery Plus and these 17, 18 other brands, that we could go, okay, we're gonna do this along this area, but we don't have to be everything to everybody. We just have to be really focused and good for our customers and understand it in these spaces. It helped us to create a differentiated sort of value in a space that was highly competitive, and frankly, we were late. We were 18 months already late to the game. Everybody else had already been out there. And what we found along that way of using that, the idea of the MLP framework about customer obsession, customer love, really deeply looking at your products, your platform services in a way that's gonna generate lasting relationships. And that's what counts, right? The best brands in the world have that relationship over years, decades, right? It's passed down from generation to family. Now, I don't know if we really are gonna accomplish that with a Discovery Plus at the end of the day, but that was the tone and the tenor that we wanted. And then the last piece, of course, is like just a quick capture here of like, these were the areas. These became the most important areas to focus on. I don't care if I went back, like whether we had 6 months or 6 years, vision, mission, principles, number one most important. Understanding the heroes, the holograms, and the experience, understanding your customers and making sure that those shared goals, whether they're OKI or OKRs, KPIs, making sure that everybody was succinct and direct and focused on what was the most important areas. And then that allowed us to democratize, obviously, the product experience through collaboration. And then the last piece, again, I could go on and on about that, and I won't. Don't forget about measurement, right? What's your metrics? What's your measurement? Align your data. What does your success criteria actually look like? How are you gonna increase that? How are you gonna use that to increase velocity, speed, and ultimately scale? That's really the dynamic. That's the calculation. That's the molecular structure. And so that gets you, this was a concept piece, right? That's still in development as far as I know. I've been gone for over a year. But that gets you to launch. That allows you for every sort of idea and framework behind it, right? Not just Discovery Plus, but like that will take you around the world. And I think that is it. Thank you. And catch me afterwards. I know that was a lot. There's all kinds of deep weeds I'd be happy to discuss with anybody.
We've got some questions in the Slack. First question is, can you describe a time you said no to a C-suite executive and how that went?
Maybe I should have just done that. That should have been the whole thing. I've been doing this for long enough that, I've been in this game for 25 plus years, right? And I've seen every challenge and every piece. And so I think the biggest thing for me is like, I love it. Like once you embrace the power of no, and it's how you say it, right? You guys heard me a little bit. I said, I'm not telling you no. Like a lot of times I'm not just gonna go hardcore and just tell them no. Sometimes, I did it a few times, but usually I'll frame it more in the way as like, I'm not saying no, I'm just saying not right now. And that's kind of the way to kind of do it gracefully in a way. I said no at Discovery several times. I said no at NBC. I should have said no more when I was at Microsoft. When I was on my own, it was easy, right? You're actually being paid to go in. You're like, that's just not gonna work, right? But I think when you're in these organizations, you're developing, it doesn't matter whether you're 5 people or 500 people or 5,000 people. It's making sure that when you're saying no, you're not just saying, no, I'm not doing this, right? It's like, no, but we're gonna figure out a way to work through it, right? I'll give you one, and I know we're being recorded, but I think I'm in the clear now. So there was a C-suite member at Discovery with Discovery Plus, and if you saw the initial launch, there was a lot of it which was Disney-esque in a way, the campaigns, the outer part. Many of us were not comfortable with that, but we also knew that that was familiar and it was gonna work. There was a point within the service that, we had 6 months, and it was like, they wanted the characters, right? The personalities, Bobby Flay and Guy Fieri and Giada and all these other people, like literally like animating, popping in and out of the interface. And we're just like, all of us are sitting there and we're like, okay, like we came back and we're like, we're dealing with what, 10? Like, are you talking about like Flash? Like, where is your mindset at this point? Like, we're talking about, global framework services and all these things. So I did say no at that point. Actually, I didn't say no. I said, I don't think that's a great idea, but we'll get back to you, right? So that was the nice way of saying no. And I swear on my life, it came up at least like 3 or 4 other times. Are you guys working on that animated thing with them popping out of logos? I'm like, yeah, we got it. We got you.
We'll get back to you.
We'll get back to you. We'll get back to you. Yeah. It's okay.
Okay, wonderful. We've got time for a couple more questions. So you had little time to dev and were late to market. So you had to take this differentiated feature strategy. How did you choose, with so little time, who to serve with the MLP?
I mean, I think, so we were fortunate, right? So a little bit when and that's why I say it's a deeper discussion. Like, we were fortunate enough in many ways that we had all these other brands, all these other networks. So there was data, right? But there was mostly like what we call linear data. There was television data about the users, the customers, right, and their behaviors. But those of us who work in, more on the digital side of it know that, like, quote unquote, real traditional television or linear data doesn't really count. I mean, what we found, is that great, people were engaged with Food Network and HGTV, ID Network or Discovery. But what we also found, and many of you guys probably see this, is like you go into, a dentist office, or you go into a little a corner mart food place, and it's just playing in the background. What we found from the linear data was most people just had it on background because it was safe. So like all the data that we had was like messy, but we knew that there were behaviors, right? We knew there was, some sort of loyalty already in certain ways. So we were able to somewhat bootstrap a little bit off of the existing data that we had. They didn't have really clean, data on the products and the services and user data. So we had to make a fair amount of assumptions. And what we did was, fortunately, the team that we built, that I helped to kind of build was, we were able at the time when we were hiring to pull people that I knew from, NBC or Netflix or all these other areas. So like, everybody that was in some form of streaming space, whether you were at Roku, we had all these different sort of areas that we could tap into. There was a handful of us that had that kind of equity in a way. And so that was where like the instinct came into play, because we're like, look, we know this, right? It's like a skip intro button. We shouldn't be debating a skip intro button on a video service. That is just something that even everybody within the organization actually was using, yet, we weren't gonna have any data on any of our platforms that showed that you should have a skip intro button. But for the love of God, like, you go look at Netflix and every other service, like, I don't need to debate that. Like, some things are just not debatable. So that was kind of where we were able to shift.
We'll get back to you later on that one.
We won't. We're just like, we're doing it. I will say this, unfortunately, after I left, after our first launch, it still took 18 months for them I think there's a skip intro button on it now. 18 months. Whole nother conversation around backlogs, right? 18 months to do 2 weeks of work.
Yeah. Well, we are out of time. There's more questions in Slack, but thank you so much. Let's give Shawn another round of applause, please.
Thank you. Thank you for putting up with me, you guys.